let food be your medicine. We are here together with Adriano Panzironi and Dr. Christian Orlando just to talk about these topics. The topic of this block is joint problems, so I would say right away, let's air the introductory video.
Joint pain affects 50% of the population over the age of 50. Practically about 15 million Italians suffer from degenerative osteoarticular, arthritic, or arthritic type of diseases. But the percentage rises to 80% in people over the age of 75. These are disabling degenerative diseases affecting all joints, such as those of the knees, hips, hands, and vertebrae. The national healthcare expenditure for the treatment of these diseases amounts to about $6.5 billion annually, but it is bound to increase over time because drug treatments are only symptomatic. The number of restorative surgeries, such as joint replacement, has also taken on impressive numbers. More than 100,000 hip replacements a year, 85,000 of the knee, and 15,000 of the shoulder, knee, and ankle.
Dr. Orlando, let's talk right away about what joint pain is.
Let us make a distinction between arthrosis and arthritis. Arthrosis tends to be due to an alteration of the catabolic and anabolic phases of cartilage to which they are subjected on a daily basis. Also here, a diet rich in insulin carbohydrates alters this phase, therefore, of catabolism and anabolism by thinning the cartilage present in our joints, following also an excessive activity of metalloproteases that are enzymes present in the cells of the synovial fluid that tend to serve to counteract a bacterial action, but that if hyperexpressed, give precisely a degeneration of cartilage. So this causes there to be an exposure of the bone, underlying cartilage, with abnormal growth. So by simply reversing the trend of both the diet, by decreasing inflammation, but more importantly, then giving our body the proteins that by breaking down into amino acids give the proper nourishment, and also with, in short, vegetables rich therefore in antioxidants go to decrease the inflammation of the joint itself. Arthritis is an autoimmune type of pathology because as a result of this diet rich in carbohydrates, as we have said so far, our immune system goes haywire. So the activation of cortisol, which leads to the elimination of Thohn lymphocytes and an increased proliferation of T2 and therefore of histamine. This causes our immune system to recognize as an adversary our own tissues and then go to hit them. And at that point, therefore, inflammation and reduction precisely of cartilage is created. The thing that makes me laugh the most about these pathologies is that they are commonly called pathologies of the elderly, but in reality it is not so, because apart from the fact that by now it has been seen through the numbers that many young people have this kind of pathology, because precisely this diet has now brought them this excessive amount of food that we have available has caused even young people to have this kind of arthrosis. But then you cannot say, I am elderly and therefore it is normal that they have it. There is not this normality, but it is due precisely to an incorrect diet that we have been carrying around for years.
Here is an incorrect diet that we have been carrying around for years. Mr. Panzironi, listen well, because Dr. Orlando said a very right thing. I go on the Higher Institute in Health, and it tells us regarding arthritis, you have to eat healthy. And here the diet should consist of a variety of foods that are obviously... It starts with fruits and vegetables. Then it puts bread, pasta, rice, and potatoes. Then the starchy foods, meat and fish, eggs and beans, milk and dairy, fats and sugars. I don't know if you want to get away from them or if you have the patience and the kindness to explain to us these directions that the Superior Institute of Health gives us.
Should the National Institute of Health explain to us why, since everybody eats these foods, there is these huge cases of osteoarthritis and arthritis as most people age. But also, as Orlando said, obviously young people are starting to suffer from them as well. These are such widespread diseases that obviously have depended precisely on a diet. So, indicated by the National Institute of Health, on the contrary, a diet without insulin carbohydrates, they are able instead to restore that malfunctioning of the immune system and above all to allow our body to bring itself into a rebuilding phase. Cartilage is probably the most sensitive part of our body from the point of view of wear and tear. Regardless of however some orthopedists say that our cartilages are like the tires of a car for which after 20,000 kilometers we have to change because this is the logic of modern orthopedic science, in reality, just though it is true that these cartilages are subjected to wear and tear, given also to movement, because even sportsmen have a greater problem of this type. Actually, our body, when faced with a demand for increased utilization of these cartilages, has the ability in a first catabolic and then anabolic phase to literally rebuild our cartilages. So at night we have these chondrocytes that basically rebuild the extracellular matrix, obviously, of the synovial capsule. And so this leads, obviously, with proper production of hyaluronic acid, leads to improved performance of the knee, anyway, of all joints. And therefore, if there is no inflammation, that knee or that joint can be used until the last day of our life. On the contrary, instead, an inflammatory activity that prevents, on the one hand, the proper production of synovial fluid, on the other hand, obviously, the reconstruction of the chondrocytes in an anabolic phase. This obviously leads to constant and continuous wear and tear. Until then, the cartilage will be thinned more and more. Then there will be bone spurs that come precisely from the joint bone. So even where it is possible to have a cartilage rebuilt with poor nutrition, there will always remain these exposed bones that, when obviously, create some wear and tear, pain, and then you are forced to do cartilage replacement.
So I take my cue from what you just said, Mr. Panzironi, because you talked about reconstruction, so tissue reconstruction, cartilage reconstruction, and there is interleukin-6 that has a very important role in this. It has a very important fundamental role in the onset of osteoarthritis, but also very important in terms of tissue reconstruction. So I invite our director to air this tutorial. Let's see it together.
Interleukin-6 is a protein molecule produced by various cell types, particularly immune system cells, muscle cells, and adipocytes. Interleukin-6 is a cytokine that can induce both a pro- and anti-inflammatory effect. It all depends on the amount of this cytokine present in the bloodstream. Its job is, for example, to stimulate chondrocyte cells present in cartilage, but also osteoclasts for bony tissue remodeling and fibroblasts for matrix remodeling. It is therefore a cytokine that can promote tissue repair following trauma or simply in response to physical activity. Excess interleukin-6, on the other hand, induces hyperactivation of the Th1 immune system, the same system that is activated when we are under attack by a cold virus. In fact, interleukin-6 acts on the hypothalamus, inducing fever. The excess also acts on cartilage by inflaming it, excessively increasing degradation, thus inducing the phenomenon of osteoarthritis.
Panzironi, from this video we deduce that balance is important. Our body, as you always said, is a perfect machine, but it has to be in balance, and this balance we go to find through nutrition and supplementation.
But of course, interleukin is one of the queens of inflammation, for example, in people who, during this COVID problem, have had the cytochemical storm. One of the most expressed interleukins is interleukin 6, but interleukin we produce when we do excess physical activity because it is a molecule that basically, on the one hand, stimulates post-inflammatory reconstruction. On the other hand, in the maximum expression, it activates increasingly stronger immune responses and therefore basically turns on the immune system, which thereby continues to block repair and continue to destroy the matrix, in this case of cartilage. So if we do this overexpression of this interleukin 6, induced precisely by an overactivation of the immune system, we throughout our body undergo metabolic alterations. So you don't just have a problem with your knee, you have a problem with all your joints. And this, if on the one hand, of course, is a main reason for the occurrence of osteoarthritis, on the other hand, it gives us hope for the good because we know that by reducing interleukin 6, these inflammations are extinguished and people become healthy again and can regain any kind of movement they used to do without having any pain anymore, and most importantly, avoiding expensive and dangerous surgeries.
So I want to have our Dr. Orlando confirm, so nutrition and supplementation play a very important role in joint problems.
Surely they have a fundamental role in joint problems because, as we have just said, precisely the proteins are the building blocks of our cartilage. So they give the correct nourishment for the reconstruction phase. Also, for example, vegetables have excellent antioxidants to decrease inflammation. So going to talk about sport, for example, omega-3 are essential because sport, in any case, brings stress and therefore activates cortisol. So all supplements such as the Serenity Pro, omega-3, vitamin C, vitamin D for our immune system are all fundamental and essential supplements so that we go precisely to counteract that degenerative phenomenon due to either excessive sports activity. Or in any case, help the phase precisely of reconstruction at the joint level of the joints, therefore of cartilage, etc.
On that book that you have right now in your hand, we have very important results, very important numbers.
Before we talk about numbers, because obviously people for dogmatic medicine are numbers, for us, they are important testimonies.
Like this one we just
to hear a
heard.
person who for 30 years has suffered from a disease and therefore has basically lived their life with less quality, because 30 years of life. A person who is 50, basically most of his life has been lived in suffering. This person has changed his lifestyle and in 3 days has solved what medicine has failed to do in 30 years. This is unbelievable, 3 days.
In fact, Mr. Macaroni said, I didn't know what to call this thing. It looks like
This
miraculous, as we also often said with Life 120
makes
stories.
us understand how nature punishes us when we follow a bad lifestyle, such as the Mediterranean diet, and safeguards our health the moment we go back to eating the right things, even the joint problems, the gentleman said. But we say this every time. Whenever you eat and you go back to eating badly, it only takes even a small slip that those pains that have subsided and disappeared inevitably come back. It is the so-called litmus test, and yet in spite of all this, we are not believed, because if we were believed by everyone, evidently all Italians today would be doing Life 120. But on the contrary, when you have dogmatic medicine that criminalizes you, that says what you say is not true, and therefore allows so many Italians that you don't know the truth, these 30 years multiplied by 60 million people, who is going to give these years of health back to the people who have lost it, and because of dogmatic medicine, they can't get it back? That is the question
that's a
he
good
would have
question.
asked.
Exactly what we are talking about. Yes, sometimes they are interchanged.
sembrerà una cosa molto strana da voi, quando molto prende il medico, dopo 26 giorni mi fa una sciatalgia. Anche ora quando ne parlo sembra di dire una cosa abnorme, però la realtà è stata questa. La cosa che io ebbi immediato quando iniziai online dicendo dopo 3 giorni passò una gastrite che mi portavo dietro da 3 anni. E i medici che avevo contattato poi mi avevano detto ma sono guardi se lo stress questo se la porterà dietro per tutta la sua vita. Quindi io mi ero più rassegnato a prendere dei farmaci che stavano
Thanks to Mr. Panzironi, I also thank our Dr. Orlando. We have run out of time as far as let food be your medicine. We thank you for being here to talk about these diseases that are so important and so disabling for the whole population. And the appointment, of course, is with the next Let Food Be Your Medicine.